Welcome to the Regulation Podcast, brought to you by the Institute of Regulation. Once again, we hope this podcast will help you understand what regulation is all about, what it's all for, and of course, why it matters to the public. My name is Anthony Oliver, and I'm going to lead today's discussion as we focus on enforcement and its role as a key lever for change in the regulation toolkit. It is, of course, a complex and challenging area, so I hope that over the next 20 minutes or so we can learn a bit more about how regulators might approach enforcement. As usual, I hope that we can give you a new perspective on the priorities and challenges you face as regulators and a clearer understanding of how the Institute of Regulation can help you. So, let me introduce my guest today, Dr Russell Richardson, General Counsel and Company Secretary of the North Sea Transition Authority, the body that regulates and influences the oil, gas and carbon storage industries. Russell is also leading the Institute of Regulation's new special interest group on enforcement. So, welcome Russell. Thanks for joining me on the Regulation Podcast today.
Thanks very much for the invitation, Anthony.
Great. Well, Russell, as I explained, you are General Counsel and Company Secretary of the North Sea Transition Authority, the body that regulates the oil, gas and carbon storage industries. And it's helping also to transition the sector towards a low carbon future. So how do you describe your role in regulation at the North Sea Transition Authority?
As a regulator for oil and gas and carbon storage, as you say, the NSTA, the short term for North Sea Transition Authority, we look to use our powers to make sure the licensees, the companies that we regulate, operate in a responsible way, which supports both the UK's energy security and also helps the government meet its net zero to 2050 target. I mean, we do that through various methods, including using our licensing and consents process to determine which companies can undertake oil and gas exploration and production, carry out gas or carbon storage activities to ensure that the work progresses in a timely manner and that the activities follow good industry practice in the area. We also look to make sure that the operators adhere to agreed limits on production volumes and, importantly, flaring and venting. Operators also need separate authorizations to deal with other things as well, which we look at.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, one of your key regulated roles is holding the industry to account. And I think it's halving upstream emissions by 2030. That's a target I think you've got there. I mean, is that becoming your main regulatory objective then?
It's very important to us. Net zero is now at the heart of our strategy. And it obliges industry to help the UK government reach the 2050 net zero target. I wouldn't say it's our only regulatory objective, though, but it is one of our three priority areas, each of which has relatively equal weight. So we look at energy security, emissions reduction, and accelerating the transition to net zero. The NSTA seeks to bolster the UK's energy security and ability to meet current demand, 75% of which is met by oil and gas at present. We also hold and look to hold industry to account on emission targets, especially those set out in the North Sea Transition Deal. Part of that is making domestic production cleaner by monitoring performance, issuing tough guidance on flaring, making robust use of consents and demanding pace on platform electrification. And that ties into accelerating an orderly transition to net zero. For example, we've run the first UK carbon storage licensing round. We've identified opportunities to repurpose infrastructure for CCS and H2, and that's looking to drive the integration of energy systems to optimise the North Sea's potential.
Okay, and that's essentially pumping carbon dioxide back into the holes from which the gas and the oil came out of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's doing the process the other way.
Okay, I mean, a huge number of challenges you've got there. I mean, how would you describe? I mean, and I think those challenges are going to become increasingly political, of course, as we move towards the next election. We're already hearing a lot of talk about, obviously, energy is a big political hot potato at the moment. I mean, how would you describe the NTSA's main challenges right now? What's on your desk? That's a question I often ask.
Well, quite a few things on my desk, but I mean, it's important coming back to emissions, given this conversation, definitely, and ensuring we help support industry in their move to that transition. And just to say that the North Sea transition deal, which set out that production emissions to be halved by 2030, for us, that's a minimum. That's what we expect as a minimum, and we're pushing companies to surpass that. And for example, things are moving in the right direction. And between 2018 and 21, emissions from productions fell by more than a fifth. And current statistics indicate there's going to be a further reduction in 2022, which we'll set out in our upcoming emissions monitoring report. And these improvements, changing behaviours, you were talking about it at the beginning, have been achieved with a combination of approaches. For example, we've issued tougher guidance on developments in the North Sea to make sure that there should be no routine flaring or venting by 2030 at the latest. We track, monitor and benchmark performance data. And I think that's very important. They always say, if you can't measure it, you can't regulate it. So this is why it's important to do that. And we have closer scrutiny of operators' requests for flaring consents. And it's something that we look at as part of our enforcement approach, which no doubt we'll come on to later. And we've used our sanction powers, for example, issuing nearly £200,000 worth of fines in late 2022, dealing with consent breaches. But also there must be credit given to industry for making substantial investments in equipment designed to minimise flaring, such as flare gas recovery units.
Right, yeah.
So it's a balance of things that helps move the UK towards this.
And it's an exciting place to be right now, I imagine, isn't it?
Yeah. It is very exciting, and I think the NSTA is in the middle of the conversations that are going on, because we're there with the expertise and the willingness to help that transition. It's not an overnight thing. There are many things that need to be in place to ensure that it works in a way that helps support those across the UK. And to be part of that, as you say, is a very exciting opportunity right now.
You mentioned enforcement. Well, let's talk about it now. You lead the Enforcement Special Interest Group at the Institute of Regulation. I mean, clearly it's about tackling some cross-cutting themes that are common to all regulators. So what would you say are the specific issues that to resolve around enforcement?
So that's a really interesting question, because it's not just for the NSTA. Enforcement is something that all regulators look at. A regulator, by definition, is somebody who looks to make sure rules are followed, the rules that government set out.
Yeah.
And different regulators have different challenges within that enforcement. Now, without going into too much detail, the NSTA, I think, is quite a special regulator, because it's not like your competition regulators such as Ofcom or Ofwat or the CMA that's looking to just take a very direct line about market dynamics and how they are approached. We're there more to help support both government and industry in reaching these targets. And indeed, I think we're one of the first regulators to have a commitment to collaborate with industry and government for those purposes. So it's very important to understand that context and how we regulate.
So on the face of it, you could say, well, enforcement is, there's a lot of stick involved, a potential for a lot of stick, but there's also quite a lot of carrot that you're dealing with there, trying to get people to work together to really meet those objectives.
Yeah, and the carrot way is always the best way. I always say that the relationship's broken down if you're going to enforcement. You do need to have that stick ready. You do need to have those powers ready. But it's a failure on both parts if you get to that stage. So it's much better to try and work around, find a way forward that all parties can work with. And that's where the collaboration comes in.
So how can this group help? I mean, what's the ambition or the output from the special interest group?
The output is the shared knowledge and the learnings. And that's one of the reasons why the Institute of Regulation not only was set up to share learnings amongst all the different regulators that are members of the Institute, but also to learn from them and to have open conversations where you're saying, well, look, in enforcement, we're having problems with knowing what level to set a fine, or what behaviours we're especially considering this time,
Right.
or even our case management systems. So it's that approach to things. It's also relevant, I think, that the Institute caters for and encourages regulators to join from all types of industries and public support areas. For example, as members, we have the Care Quality Commission, the Civil Aviation Authority, the Gambling Commission, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the Office for Students, Ofqual, Ofsted. To have this broad community is important as we cover many significant areas of our day-to-day lives.
Well, in setting up the group, you focus on two areas. You mentioned them both there, casework management and financial penalties. I mean, let's start with the casework management stream. I mean, what are the challenges that this group will particularly tackle?
Casework management, it's making sure things are done in a timely fashion and the right people to get to have an input, and it's all done fairly. And in a way that when you're dealing with a company, they also understand what's going on. And without something that helps an organisation keep that flow going, things can stagnate and stop sometimes.
Right.
So it's very important to have a case management system.
So that's whether you are NTSA or whether you are Ofwat or whether you're Ofgem or whatever, no matter where you are in the regulation, that casework management rigor, it's applicable across the entire portfolio.
Absolutely. And it helps build trust with those you're regulating, because they feel, well, actually, things are being done. We're being heard. We have an opportunity to put our case forward. It also allows you to be able to manage your resources, because we've all got very tight resources and we have to prioritize what we're looking at. So, for example, the NSTA is looking at emissions reduction as an enforcement issue. So it's very good to set that out in a case management process, because then you know which ones you're looking at are related to emissions and which ones aren't, for example.
Right, yeah. And I suppose the other side of it is the second tranche of what you're doing, which is around financial penalties. And as you say, that's kind of a place you don't want to go, but you have to have it there in case everything else fails. I mean, what are the specific issues that you're looking to tackle there?
So it's not just financial penalties, it's also the reputational issues involved when it's made very open and clear that a regulator is looking at a company and their behaviours. And it's changing behaviours. So, if the NSTA identifies areas that are not working, where companies are not complying with what they should be doing, then you look at the enforcement. Part of that is the potential to issue financial penalties. Now, coming back to the unique nature of the NSTA, we don't have something like the CMA 10% of annual global turnover as a penalty.
Right, yeah.
We have £1 million. Now, when you're dealing with the companies that we deal with, some people say, well, that's not enough.
That's a maximum, is it? That's a maximum you could, yeah.
That's a maximum. And this is where I come back to the reputational elements as well, because it's not just the level and value of the penalty, it's also what that penalty means. And the indicators to the market, and also those investing in those companies have been found wanting. So it's part of that process.
Right. Yeah. So it's basically you're trying to make sure that financial penalties are applicable. If they're applicable, they're appropriate, but they actually mean something. I mean, give us an example of the kind of challenge that you see day in and day out in your current role. Is it simply getting that level right?
No, I think it's very binary to say, well, should it be X amount or Y amount? And it's very much done on a case-by-case basis, as it should be done. But you are looking for that deterrent effect, and to deter, and it will be tied to the behaviour. So, for example, in our guidelines, we set out about the level of fine that we propose. Takes into consideration senior management involvement and knowledge, and whether they should have been across what was going on. And that's very important. And that shines a light, because we make public our decision on any behaviours that we're trying to change.
Yeah.
So it and you also start to then look at previous enforcements and how they've been approached and the sort of things that the regulator takes into consideration when looking at the fines.
Yeah, because ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to influence behaviour, because if all a financial penalty does is simply ramp up the cost to the public or increase the or reduce the amount that they can invest, then that's really not achieving the desired objective.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not a cost of business.
No.
It should never be a cost of business.
Right.
Lawyers on the other side should never say, well, you can get this if you do that. It's not fixed penalty aspects of parking fines.
Right, yeah.
It's very important. It's tied to behaviours, and it's that deterrent element to it, both the publicity that's involved and the level.
Yeah, because otherwise if it does become a cost of business, then you're just spiralling the decline. Yeah.
Yeah.
So NSTA is a founding member of the new Institute of Regulation. Obviously, you've set up this special interest group to help drive forward the shared knowledge around enforcement. But how do you see overall this new organisation really helping the world of regulation?
I'm amazed it hasn't been done like this before, to be honest.
Right.
Because it's always made sense to me. And I was very fortunate to have that opportunity a few years ago to get involved with a few of the other trustees to put this together. And it's been a really interesting exercise in determining what does a regulator look for? Why is it set up? And what is a body helping support regulators looking for? So when we sort of incorporated the company, we looked at our objectives, and they are really to promote and provide education and training in the theory and practice of regulation, and to research development and promote good practice in regulation. So that's the sort of objective.
So in terms of your activities at NSTA, I mean, I suppose, how do you see, what do you see the IO actually doing to help you? And crucially, who do you see it serving?
I think there are a lot of stakeholders, different types of stakeholders, and we're still maturing as an organisation. It was a start-up about a year and a half ago. We're starting to get a bit more traction, interest. We've got, I think, quite a few members, institutional members and individual members for the organisation. So it's developed as an open space for discussion, sharing common themes, responding to government think pieces on various matters, such as duties to be put in place for future regulators. We think it helps to share knowledge for those in industry themselves, because the website will set out some of our thinking. For example, in the special interest group on enforcement, we are looking to publish something on our meeting at the beginning of this year. We set out the discussions.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, it's a community, setting up an open community for people to be involved.
Yeah.
It's not just for regulators. It's for those who are regulated, for those who have an interest in regulation, that open community.
It's a safe place for that professional conversation around the issues around regulation. Let's talk a bit about you, Russell. You're a lawyer by profession. I mean, how did you end up in regulation?
It's an interest in politics, an interest in people, an interest in the state and how they can influence people's lives. My law degree, I went on to do a master's in international human rights and European law. I then moved to do a PhD in individual rights. I did my training in the city and then moved to work for the telecoms regulator at the time, Oftel.
Right.
And for me, that had a real mission about helping protect consumers.
Right.
And, we all have an identity and a reason for doing things, or we're trying to find that. And for me, it's very much that sort of public help. And a lot of people who work for public authorities have that sort of that inner feeling of looking to try and help support something positive like that.
Try and create that element of justice, I suppose, to make sure that the bad guys aren't getting away with it and the good guys are being supported. Can anyone become a regulator?
Yeah, just have an interest in what regulators do, and there are jobs available. And we have a job board on the Institute of Regulation website that sets out jobs that are available in regulation. And many people come in, but there are opportunities to try something different within organisation. For example, the NSTA really supports that opportunity to get experience in different areas of it. So we try and be flexible when people do come into the organisation for that. So it's really just having an interest or curiosity, really, about what they do. Sorry, just to come back, really, with the NSTA's mission in relation to supporting the transition, we found a lot of people are now coming in with that interest and enthusiasm, and this gives them the opportunity to help support that.
Well, certainly there's no bigger issue on the agenda right now than driving towards low carbon, net zero, etc. So
absolutely,
we talked a bit earlier about the challenges that is faced by regulators. I mean, good regulation, is vital to the effective functioning of businesses and public services. It's a force both to prevent bad outcomes, but also to drive, and we said earlier, to drive and encourage better performance, better behaviour. I mean, when should you be enforcing with penalties, and when are there other means to persuade and cajole? When are they more appropriate?
So with the NSTA, part of our strategy is to support industry in their operational matters. So we term it asset stewardship. So we look to have open conversations with industry about what their plans are. We've got the ability to attend their meetings. We are there also in a advisory capacity as well as a regulatory capacity. And we set up the NSTA as an organisation to have separate areas that deal with those. So there's no conflict there, and people have different roles. And if there is a problem, a dispute, we are then involved to try and facilitate an outcome that both follows our strategy and is also something that both sides would support it in that way. So there's a lot that can be done before there's a problem that then needs to be passed to our enforcement team to look at.
Right, yeah. I mean, we talked about the two areas of case management and financial penalties that you're dealing with there. When you look at the challenges that are around case management and regulation, I mean, does it vary substantially between different industry sectors? Are certain industry sectors better at it than others?
As mentioned, we have different types of regulators as Institute members who regulate across our day-to-day lives. And while our members have similar issues in enforcement, for example, we all have to decide what powers we have and what do we want to achieve with those powers. One size does not fit all. So my experience is telecoms, IT regulation, having worked for Oftel first, then Ofcom, and then the telecoms and broadcasting regulator in the Cayman Islands. And then I decided to have a new challenge and go into energy as a consequence after that.
Right.
From talking that, it's those very different approaches. And from my experience within the telecoms regulatory sphere, it's not as much that trying to find a collaborative approach to things. It's more, right, we are going to enforcement. We've got these very specific enforcement powers. There's various reasons for that. And there's a history of development at Ofcom, for example, as to why they're now at that place. Whereas I see the NSTA, because if we were to stop having a positive relationship with industry, and we always went to litigation, things would grind to a halt.
Right, yeah.
Such as supporting this move to the transition.
Yeah.
There's a lot of need for investment in both carbon capture storage, and it's allowing that investment to come in and to take effect. Yeah. So if you do enforce with a heavy hand, that sometimes can slow down that relationship.
So financial penalties, therefore, are more appropriate in some sectors than in others. Give us an example of a sector where financial penalties might work well.
So it's this cost of business, and Ofcom, for example, has both challenges in the telecoms area, but they're coming to look at online content at some point.
Yeah.
And with that, they're dealing with multinational companies across many jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. So it depends on the reputational parts to those companies and whether they want to maintain a working relationship with the regulator, or they look at it as very much a conflict-based relationship. So in those respects, then higher penalty levels, that 10% of the annual worldwide turnover, would bring more deterrent in those circumstances. Focuses their minds.
Yeah, so it was clearly, as I said earlier, the financial penalties for for network rail. They can never be large enough to really be anything other than a rounding error in their overall business, and B, anything you take out of that business comes straight off the amount that they would be investing for the public good.
Yeah, and normally it's then passed down to the consumer anyway in those sort of relationships.
Yeah.
And this again is this cost of business element. So it's very important that regulators don't just say, well, I've got a big stick, do what we say. You've got to try and have that working relationship, and have, not a trust in the regulator, but at least some sort of respect and understanding of where the regulator is trying to get.
Yeah. While you're also demonstrating to the public that you're on their side. The future... what's your ambitions for the special interest group? What does success look like to you?
Well, success, I think, should look across what the Institute of Regulation looks at, because they've set up various special interest groups, for example, enforcement, one's on equality, diversity and inclusion. There's one on legal, there's one on policy, one on sustainability, insights and research. And it comes back to the community aspects of these, that open space to discuss issues, to share information, to share approaches, and to inform the public about what regulators look at. Because a lot of people are just informed by what's in a newspaper rather than actually what people are doing. So success would be a greater understanding of what regulators do, both externally from consumers and citizens, but also within each other. So I've got a better idea of what Ofwat's looking at, for example.
Yeah. I suppose the final thing is how can people get involved? You said that the IOR is not just for regulators; it's for people who are in regulation or being regulators. How can people get involved in the enforcement special interest group, for example?
Become a member. So the details are on our website, ioregulation.org. And that sets out what we as the Institute are looking to do. If you become a member, you can then attend the regular meetings we have to discuss matters. We hold an annual conference that is free for members to come along and discuss these issues. And we're always very open for anyone who wants to take forward something that's really passionate to them within that context. So it's really an opportunity to make of it as much as you want to, if you have that enthusiasm and interest.
Okay, and if you want to become a regulator, a great place also to go and see what opportunities there are as well.
Yes, yeah, and the jobs board on the website. Coming back to that.
Well, Russell, that's great. Thanks very much for joining me today on the Regulation Podcast. Enforcement, it's a huge subject, and I think you've made a start there, certainly in unpacking the work that you face in the special interest group. So thanks very much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you, Anthony, for the time.
Great, many thanks. I'm sure that we're going to be hearing more from you, Russell, and the NSTA in the future podcasts very soon. That's all we've got time for today, but we've got more regulation podcasts planned and more guests to talk to as we continue to get stuck into some of the biggest issues faced across this vast sector. If you haven't done so already, do, as Russell says, do check out the IOR website. That's www.ioregulation.org, where you'll find a huge amount of really useful information about the Institute Institute and about how you can get involved, and of course about the issues and challenges facing regulation today. And of course you'll find details of all the latest podcasts which you can listen to and share. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks again to Russell, and on behalf of the Institute of Regulation, I look forward to seeing you again very soon.